What is being called a new militant Christian nationalism, a wave, seems to be rising in the UK, with one bishop, Kieran Dewar's mass baptisms and a fiery Unite the Kingdom sermon. The American right-wing political activist who was murdered at an event a few months ago, Charlie Kirk, of course, was a devoted Christian himself. He sort of seemed to mix right-wing, what you'd call right-wing politics, with his own theological beliefs. Let's have a listen to Charlie speaking at one of his events.
I believe Christian charities and churches should step up and feed and to clothe and to be a helping hand, not government. In fact, we used to be a country that we had a lot more private charities going and helping people in need. In fact, I would make a contention, if the government cut all of its social welfare, every church would step up to make sure that no kid went hungry in this country and that no kid would die of starvation.
I would love if my tax dollars went to helping people who needed food. That's my argument here.
Well,
I think that
it does. Over $1 trillion a year goes to food stamps and SNAP and Medicaid.
Perfect,
so,
and I'm glad with
no,
that.
But actually, it doesn't help them nearly as much as you think. Let me tell you why. Because then we subsidize bad eating habits of the poor, so that the working poor is very obese, so they go buy Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Frito-Lays. And the church is not involved, where the church would then say, hey, instead of going to the local grocery store with a bunch of food stamps and SNAP benefits, why don't you come by our church and we'll feed all of you and a much more healthy meal made by our own members, and then you can hear the gospel afterwards. That's the church in practice.
If Jesus fed people for free, taught people for free, and healed people for free, why don't we do the same?
Churches should.
There it is. Churches should. That is Charlie. I find it hard to disagree with what he said there. Let's speak with Bishop Kieran Dewar on this very story. Kai, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I mean, just your reaction to what you just heard Charlie Kirk say there.
I completely agree. The church has and always should be God's welfare system for society. When you look at the Jewish community, they don't go to the state if somebody loses their job or can't afford food. They go to the synagogue, and this to me is where the church is failing in the United Kingdom. We don't deal with the people that the Bible tells us we need to deal with in the way in which we should be dealing with them. We send them to the state to be fed, to be clothed. That's just, in my opinion, completely unacceptable.
So we've kind of lost our sort of Christian heartbeat, as it were, in this nation. And I know a lot of your work, and some of it, some people call it controversial. I wouldn't, but some people say, well, hang on a second, here's a man of the cloth monkeying around, you know, Unite the Kingdom rallies, and, you know, happy to share the voice of many of those in society that are sort of ostracised by the media sometimes I'm sure rightly so, sometimes a complete injustice, frankly. But either way, it's not an area you imagine a man of Christian faith would find himself. But you are kind of, you're in that narrative and you feel very strongly about it.
I do, and why wouldn't I be there? Jesus went to where the sinners were. He didn't hide in the synagogue and wait for people to come to him. And this is the ethos that the church in this United Kingdom has lost. We've stopped going to people. We, you know, for too many decades now, the Church of England, Church of Wales, other churches, they open the doors and expect people to come to them. Why would I? My whole mission, I actually said this to my Archbishop last week when we were together in Birmingham, and he looked at me with a bit of startling disbelief at first, and then caught on to what I was saying, because I said to him, Your Grace, I'm sick of trying to get people to church. I am all about trying to get the church to people, and that means meeting them where they need to be met, not expecting them to come to a building. That is the very thing that Christ teaches us in the gospel, and we need to be doing far more of it.
But when you go to a Unite the Kingdom event, are you going there because you're going to meet sinners, or are you going there because you're going to meet people you actually agree with?
Both, in many respects. There's a lot of political beliefs there that I share. There's an awful lot I completely disagree with. My presence there, as I said to Sky News, doesn't endorse somebody else's politics. I'm not there for that. We look at September, I had the unique opportunity to stand in front of 150,000 people according to the mainstream news, and over 1 million people according to the event organizers, to proclaim the gospel, to pray and offer what I call a sermonette of hope and inspiration centered around the very ethos of the Christian message. And guess what? If if Stand Up to Racism or Hope Not Hate or all the other lefty liberals sent me an invitation to speak at one of their events, guess where I'd be? Right there, speaking for them. Because it's not about the platform and it's not about the politics. It's all about the people.
I'd love to. If you do get invited to the Hope Not Hate Christmas Bash, Kai, can I be your +1? Because I'd love to.
Certainly.
I'd love to. I'd love to see how that conversation would pan out. What I have noticed, though, since the horrendous killing of Charlie Kirk, there has been a kind of, it was phrased at the beginning as a sort of militant Christian nationalism. I have noticed some voices online. I know you can't always judge what the rest of the world thinks by things you read online, even if lots of people endorse it and retweet it and all the rest of it. But suddenly, out of nowhere almost, people who had fairly forthright, what you would call right-wing views, and some of them correct, some of them perhaps badly worded, to be generous, suddenly started invoking the kind of the God card almost. I saw somebody actually respond who I never for one second had them down as any kind of theological sort of character in any shape or form. When asked about something, he replied, "Only Jesus knows." And I thought, well, that's a fine thing to write, but I didn't believe this guy knew what he meant when he said it. It was almost as if, Charlie Kirk, he was a practicing Christian, and that wasn't an act. He genuinely was. Are there a lot of Charlie Kirk wannabes out there now?
I think potentially there are. I am the judge of no man's soul, so I couldn't understand what drives them. The scripture says that man looks at the outward man, God examines the motives of our heart, and that is, as rightly said, only Jesus knows in that respect. I also think that brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk has spurred the church militant, as we have been known for 2 millennia, it's not a new thing, into life. When you look at the scriptures, and you look at the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, Saint Stephen, the one who we celebrate on Boxing Day, is martyred for his faith, for speaking truth to power. And suddenly that spurs the church into life. And when you look through history, every time there has been a significant martyrdom or significant persecution of the church, it has spurred the church into life. And that's exactly what we're seeing now between what's taking place with things like the United Kingdom rally, the persecution, particularly with what I find to be thoroughly unjust and unconstitutional laws concerning the Christian faith being enacted in the United Kingdom, and then couple that with that horrendous assassination. The church has and is continuing to suffer persecution. And as much as a socialist government would like to see the church disappear and go away, we have survived persecution for 2 millennia, and we are on the move again. And when they label us as Christian nationalists, this is a nation, the United Kingdom, whose very ethos is founded on Christian principles, who has a church established under law. Our sovereign is the supreme governor of the Church of England. If that is not a Christian nation, rather than this moniker that they give of Christian nationalism, I'm not quite sure what other proof you need. Our whole way of life, our culture is built on biblical principles. Our legal system, political system, founded around Christian truths and Christian principles. We are a Christian nation intrinsically linked to the principles of Scripture. And until such a time as that ever changes, we always will be a Christian nation.
And that is fair. Are you compromised, though, at times? When you see, for example, I don't know, there might be an almighty protest against a hotel that is housing asylum seekers, for example, and these are people who would be proud Brits and family values, not right-wing nut jobs or anything like that, just people who are concerned. This is our postcode. Suddenly 300 blokes have just turned up in a hotel, got no idea who the heck they are, where they come from, what their backstory is. Even if they're not intent on any sort of criminality, we just don't know. So you've got concern from people in the community, but then you've got what we are told, 300, vulnerable, stateless, homeless, mostly young men. As a Christian, does that compromise you at all in terms of where your kind of spiritual instinct goes? Does it go with the people that rode across the channel, or does it go with the concerned neighbours?
So I have a heart for both peoples, and within the context of my faith, I am to care for both people. However, I think one of the things that has truly been lost amidst the whole immigration debate, which is more than just people coming across the channel. We have tens of thousands of people that enter through legal means and then never leave once their visas expire. That's just as much a concern.
Yeah.
The Church of England at the moment has taken the point of, you know, well, we've got to welcome all the strangers and the foreigners. That's absolute claptrap, because the scripture is very clear on what we have. We have just as much a duty to good governance as we do to caring for strangers and orphans and the widows. And the church must never be in a position where we advocate the needs of other people, foreigners, invaders, for want of a better term, in certain cases, than we do in taking care of our own. This country has massive problems with child poverty. We have ridiculous numbers, more than ever, of people living below the poverty line. Homelessness is a massive issue. Families struggling to get on the property market, struggling to pay for groceries, struggling to pay for their utilities. And the state, in my opinion, is putting far more focus on caring for people entering the UK illegally than it is addressing these things. So the church would teach you, and the scriptures show us, we have a responsibility to the nation itself, to our ethnos, our people, first and foremost. And then where it is feasible and practical, we should be in a position to help those that are in need of our help.
And would that, is there sort of biblical backing, if you, for want of a phrase, for that position?
It's right through the scripture, and it's what we see taught throughout the entire of the New Testament. When people actually bother to pick up their Bible and look, it is right there. That we cannot put the needs of other people coming here to the United Kingdom, from a church social teaching standpoint, above the needs of our own people who are struggling and are being subjugated to continued struggle by successive governments that refuse to acknowledge the needs of our own citizens and put the needs of other people coming here, whether legally or illegally, above those of people, our own citizenry, that are in desperate need. That is a complete antithesis to what the scripture tells us. And when I see churches like the Church of England talking about, well, we just need to welcome everybody. No, we don't. That is not what the Bible teaches us.
Well, on that very point, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, this has only just dropped, this news, in about the last 40 minutes or so, Dame Sarah Mullally has suggested that people, well, she backs the idea of baptising asylum seekers. This, of course, comes on the back of the context of that. There was a discussion, I think, on these fake baptisms that were taking place where people were saying, yeah, I'm a Christian and look, I've been baptised and here's the evidence of it, and so I can stay here because I can't go back to Iran because they'll hang me by the watsits if I do, so I'll have to, you know, become a Christian. But she has said that she backs the idea of baptising asylum seekers. I mean, that seems an interesting position from the most senior member of the Church of England.
Well, I would simply go, what a surprise. Once again, the woke Church of England making measures and taking things. We have no proof of who some of these immigrants are, where they're coming from, what they believe, and we must never lose sight of the fact that under the Eastern religion there is a principle called taqiyya, where we would lie to do whatever we need until such a time, and that's perfectly acceptable within Islam. Conversion to Christ is not simply about baptism. It is about a genuine change of life and lifestyle. It is about submission to the teachings of Scripture and following in the path. The Apostle Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I will baptize anybody that makes a genuine profession of faith. But that profession is not just words. Their lifestyle reflects it. So we've already had one scandal with the Church of England baptizing asylum seekers. Clearly the new Archbishop of Canterbury elect is intent on causing another one.
And just a final point, at the Unite the Kingdom rally just over a month ago or so, one speaker, I think it was Ben, got the audience to chant Keir Starmer is a, and I think, well, I'll use the word anchor for the sake of broadcast, and the crowd joined in with it. Would Jesus back that?
Well, Ben isn't a Christian, for a start. Secondly, the crowd were already chanting it throughout the day before Ben got up, and I know Ben Habib personally. Would Jesus back it? No, I don't think he would, but at the same token, I understand the crowd that were there, the majority of them, are exceptionally frustrated and in absolute disbelief at the way our Prime Minister is running this country. And I understand that there is that sentiment amongst an awful lot of people. I personally don't feel like that. I just think that Keir Starmer is out of his depth as Prime Minister and is clearly pushing a socialist agenda that is the antithesis to our society and our way of life.
Yeah.
So I don't share those sentiments, but I, having been a public speaker for over 30 years, I understand what it's like to get caught up in the emotion of a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people standing in front of you. So for that, I don't judge anybody.
Yeah, some said it was offensive to, well, anchors, but that's another story. Listen, Kai, great to have you on with us. It's lovely to speak, and let's speak again. Bishop Kieran Dewar.